is my Moné La Roca. It's a bike that I built up specifically for bike packing, bike camping, and long distance rides on gravel and single track. It's not the cheapest build. It's also not top of the line. It's also not the lightest setup, but it's perfectly nimble and comfortable for what I use it for. So in this video, I'm gonna walk you guys through my bike and talk about all the components that I chose for this particular build and why. I also want to give a shout out to Melissa for suggesting this video a few weeks back. So thanks, Melissa. I really appreciate your comment. So I bought this frame in fall of 2020 after seeing a post of another La Roca on the Radavist. I saw it and I was like, this is the most beautiful bike I have ever seen. I had been thinking for a while about getting a hardtail. I'd done a bit of bike packing and bike camping with my gravel bike and with my Crespin Bora. However, I wanted to take it on single track or in places where the skinnier tires of my gravel bike just couldn't go. So I saw this post on the Radavist and I was like, I need this bike in my life. So I went on monebikes.com and ordered a frame, and I actually got a call a few hours later from Sigel Moné, who makes these bikes, and he was like, hey Hannah, I'm so sorry. I don't have any large frames left. And I was like, oh shit. I missed out on my opportunity. Talked for a minute and then, we hung up and I was like, oh man, this sucks. And then he called me back and was like, hey, I found a bike somewhere in Colorado. Some bike shop had a large frame. I'm gonna get it from them. And so I just wanna say my experience with Moné bikes was absolutely lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for making that such an amazing experience. Highly recommend working with Moné bikes. Now, there are other bike YouTubers out there who can go into frame specs and chainstay length and other geometry things. I think that Russ at Pathless Pedaled is particularly good at explaining why and how all of these things are important and how it can change or tweak your ride. However, y'all, I don't know anything about that. The frame is a Moné La Roca size large. As you guys might know if you've been watching my channel, I'm a big guy. I'm 5'11" or 181 centimeters, so I ride bigger bikes. It's a steel frame and the frame itself weighs about 5 pounds. The bottom bracket sits pretty high off the ground, and because it also has 29-inch tires, this bike makes me feel like I'm riding a horse. It's awesome. For the fork, I decided to go with a Whiskey No. 9 carbon fork. I chose a rigid carbon fork over a suspension fork because I hadn't planned on using this on a lot of single track. I wanted this bike to be as light as possible on my budget, and since a carbon wheel set was a bit out of my budget, I thought I'd go for the carbon fork instead. So I have mixed feelings about this fork. On the one hand, it's really, really light. It also has the 3 eyelets on either side for mounting cages or mini panniers, but the one thing it doesn't have is a mount for a light. So I have a sine wave beacon as a light that is powered by the dynamo hub. I had the bike shop rig it up on the left side of the fork near the brake. It is not my favorite configuration. I had it on top of my handlebars initially, but I was afraid of flipping over and having it hit my chest. If you guys have other suggestions on where to mount this light or other kind of light setups, please let me know in the comments below. I am open to suggestions. So for the wheel set, I had initially wanted the Hunt 29ers Dynamo disc wheel set, but because the supply chain is super wonky right now, it was gonna take a really long time for all of the parts to come in. What I ended up with is a 29-inch wheel set. The rims are Velocity rims. The front hub is a Shutter Precision Dynamo hub, and the rear hub is an Industry 911. I wanted a Dynamo hub because I wanted a light that could be powered on its own and that I could use to charge things in case an external battery ran out. That being said, after getting stuck once in the dark with a dynamo as my only light, I will always bring a backup. As I said before, the light is a sine wave beacon. I am not exactly sure what mount the bike shop used, but it works. It works well enough. The tires I'm running are Terravel E-Line tan wall tubeless tires. They are 29 by 2.5 inches. And these are fine tires. I don't have anything to complain about. They're nice and grippy on gravel and in mud, but they're also relatively fast rolling on the road. For brakes, I am running SRAM G2 disc brakes. These are hydraulic brakes. Y'all, I was really skeptical about getting hydraulic brakes at first. You hear horror stories about getting stuck out in the wilderness and you need to bleed the brakes or like whatever it is that you have to do to them. I'd also never ridden hydraulic brakes before. And so I was like, oh, do I really want to spend the money on these? But the guys at the bike shop were like, it's totally worth it. And so I went for it. And y'all, they stop like a car. It's really unbelievable. However, I do know that there are really good mechanical disc brakes out there. I just never tried them, but I have heard that they'll stop very similarly to hydraulic disc brakes, but they're in the same price point category. So the crankset that I'm running is a SRAM GX Eagle with a 32 tooth chainring and Shimano clipless pedals. For the drivetrain, I had initially put on a single speed cog. It was a 20T cog made by Surly, but after getting injured, I ended up deciding to put on a geared drivetrain. So I ended up putting on a SRAM GX Eagle with an 1150 cassette. As much as I wanted to be a single speed badass, my body is telling me otherwise. For the seat post, I have a 1-up dropper post and a Cell Italia Diva saddle that I borrowed from the bike fitter and I haven't given it back. I will give it back at some point, I promise. Underneath the saddle, I keep my tool roll where I have all the things for like a quick fix on the bike. As for steering, I have a little Wahoo mount where I put my Wahoo for navigation. For handlebars, I have the Salsa Salt Flat handlebar with some brown ergonomic grips. I think they're made by Aragon. I couldn't find a logo on them, so I'll find them and put them in the description below. A couple of people have asked me why I taped these bars. And the reason is that on longer rides, I kept finding myself wanting to change my hand position, and I could put my hands on the middle of the bar, but the cold aluminum was really uncomfortable, so I just wrapped it with tape. I will say that I do not like these handlebars. They don't really fit on this bike for my particular bike fit. They sit really high up on the steerer tube, so there are a lot of spacers below it, which I think is probably making the handling a little bit more wonky than it should be. There's also very little back sweep on the Salsa Salt Flats. I think it's an 11-degree back sweep, and so when I'm riding, my arms are locked out like this, which causes numb hands as well as some lower back pain. So I'm actually gonna change out these handlebars really soon. I got a package earlier this week. I just haven't put them on yet, so I'm really excited about these. Stay tuned for that video. On the down tube and on the seat tube, I have some super cheap Amazon water bottle cages. I'm eventually gonna get rid of these and get a custom frame bag that I can put a water bladder in. I just think it's more efficient for carrying water on longer rides. On the down tube, I also keep a toe peak pump. You only ever forget a pump one time. Nothing like being stranded out in the middle of nowhere with a split tire and no pump. Underneath the down tube, I am running a wide foot leader cage. I usually throw a Nalgene bottle in there for extra water storage. Overall, this bike has been great for bikepacking trips and bike camping. It carries a heavy load really, really well and remains nimble and balanced even when there's a lot of weight on the bike. I've taken this on 2 bikepacking trips so far. One trip was an attempt at the Florida Huracan earlier this year, which turned out to be a little bit of a disaster and ended up needing to call a cab in the middle of the Ocala National Forest. But the bike did really well. I plan on taking this on any future bikepacking trips that I go on, especially now that my injury is really healing up well and I'm able to ride again. Oh, thank God. Now, if there's anything that I could actually change about this bike, it would probably be that it's a little bit heavy, which I could circumvent by getting a lighter wheel set or maybe some carbon parts. That is not in my budget right now, and I think if I got to the point where I could afford to upgrade all of those things, I might shoot for a titanium bike, or if I'm feeling really risky, a carbon mountain bike. But for the time being and for the next few years, I plan on using this bike a lot. and I'm stoked about it. It's also just beautiful. Look at those welds, y'all. Look at those welds. If you have any more questions about the build, or if you want me to address anything that I didn't talk about in this video, ask me in the comments below. Read all of your comments and I'm happy to talk about this bike as much as you guys want. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next week.